Deep in the forests of North America, a creature is said to exist. A creature that people are encountering. With far too many reports to ignore, there are elements of truth behind these accounts that mankind can no longer ignore.
Breaking news out of Texas, Bigfoot is real.
Could a breeding population of large, upright, hairy hominids really exist in North America? Or is there something more paranormal at work here, deep in the woods? If just one footprint, one wood knock, or one howl is real, then man's understanding of primate evolution would be changed forever. Join the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective as they delve further into the mysteries of Bigfoot and other paranormal phenomena through the eyes of witnesses, investigators, critics, and skeptics. Join us as we look to discover what lurks from behind tall trees. Long time coming, my friends. And yes, Todd Disotell, cheers. Let's put it up there. This has been a long show coming, my friends.
Yeah.
Todd, just for a little backstory, Todd hunts not far from my house in Sullivan County, New York. And last year we were supposed to go deer hunting, and this happened, right, Todd?
Yeah. So had a detached retina in October. I had 2 weekends in the bow hunting season, my stand, and then I would have to completely retrain myself to shoot left-handed and left-eyed. So
I was
next year.
I was bummed when you called. It's like, I got to go back to have surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Since then.
So for those of you, welcome to From Behind Tall Trees. I'm Brendon Brown. We got our good friend Todd Disotell, professor at Anthropology at UMASS Amherst, correct?
Yes.
How are things up there?
Very different. So from the September of 1992, right after I graduated from Harvard, I moved to New York City and taught at New York University for 27 years. And in January of 2020, I moved to UMass Amherst to follow my wife, who took a job at the medical school in Worcester.
Worcester.
Yeah. And Amherst.
Yes. I'm
slowly learning. All my 7 years at Harvard is slowly coming back to pop the cod and the yad.
I went to UConn, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm from New York, and I went to UConn. It's like you got to go to Worcester to get the beer. Yeah, because it's like the Packy store is closed, right?
Well, now it's the weed. We have 5 dispensaries within 12 miles of my house.
You don't seem like a person that smokes a lot of pot.
I don't smoke any, and I don't see edibles. I do too much alcohol. I don't need to add another vice.
Cheers to that. So anyway, we were talking. It's important to me that I'm a big proponent of Grover Krantz's book, Big Footprints, and I've always found him as champion to the professors out there. I don't know if you've read the book. I'm sure you had.
Yeah.
So did you catch a lot of slack when you decided to investigate cryptozoological stuff, or did you do that after your tenure?
I'm trying to think when my very first show was. I actually did a MTV show, Sex in the 90s, before tenure. But
I wish I would have had that. I would have played it. Sex in the 90s.
Between Hugh Hefner and Snoop Dogg, my interview. It was pretty cool. But I think I actually had tenure, but that wouldn't have mattered. To me, so I don't call myself a squatcher, a Bigfoot researcher, or any of that. I'm a molecular primatologist.
Right.
It just so happens that the very same tools I use in my research are applicable to identifying unknown species. And my research group has identified unknown genera, unknown species, unknown subspecies of primates for the last 30 years.
Right.
So I find it, I mean, my personal reason for doing this is scientific outreach, to explain the scientific method, to be skeptical, to think of alternative explanations, to learn about how these analyses work, how evolution works, what we know already from evolution. And so these are huge audiences.
Yes.
I once did a back of bar napkin, that's where all my best work is done, calculation that in my academic career, between student lectures, conference lectures, etc., I will probably have 20,000 people listen to me.
Right.
A single episode of $10 Million Bigfoot Bounty would have 1.8 million people watching. An episode of Ancient Aliens has millions of people watching. And so, you know, my 2.5, 3, 4 minutes of an episode talking about evolution, talking about the scientific method, about being skeptical and all of those things, that's a pretty big public impact on science. Right. And so that's why I do it. Plus, you know, hey, it's fun. I've met so many. There you go. Yeah. I've met so many cool people. And as I said, I am a Bigfoot enthusiast, you know, shirts, tattoos, you name it.
Eye patch. Lean in and show them the eye patch.
Yeah, student made this for me this semester. Yeah. But I don't, as a scientist, I don't believe in anything except the scientific method.
Right.
And so I'm willing to evaluate data, to speculate on theories and do all of that stuff. But I literally don't call myself a Squatch or a Bigfoot researcher. I'm a strong skeptic, but as a scientist, I also can't say it does not exist. I mean, we can't prove a negative.
Right, and that's what I found so enlightening is when I have a lot of guests on the show, I have to do the trailers and do the teasers, and I was watching all the stuff that you put out there, and you've never been, you know, never been I'm all in on, but you're very straight down the line. You have to prove it to me, bring it or leave it at the door, right?
Yeah, and I will be honest, I am, you know, Jeff Meldrum, who's actually a friend of mine, I have defended him against people attacking him, etc. A couple years ago, we were the dual keynote speakers at Lauren Coleman's International Cryptozoology Museum conference. We disagree on interpretations of the data, obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
I said at that lecture, to date, and there were a lot of Squatchers, Bigfoot enthusiasts, and other people in the audience, I said, in my opinion, and it's a pretty educated opinion, I think, that there is zero actual credible scientific evidence for Bigfoot to date. That doesn't mean we won't find it in the future. You know, my own research on chimpanzees and gorillas and monkeys and strepsirrhines, we have found new species, subspecies, and genera. So, and they're continuously being found or rediscovered. So, right. I would still contend that there's no credible scientific evidence for which you could actually name a new taxon. Footprints and those things, that's you need real biological evidence.
That's where I was going. That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. So ichthotaxonomy, you know, traces, you're not going to get that through the International Committee on Zoological Nomenclature, the ICZN.
Right. So let me ask you a question, Todd, on that note. So they had some, and this is, we're going to just play the devil's advocate here, is they
advocate.
Right. So they had back in the day, years ago, there was these tracks that had dermal ridges on them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the trackway. Do you give that any credence at all in today's? So if somebody showed up and go, Todd, look at this. This is a big footprint with this on it.
Tracks are probably, well, besides sounds, tracks are probably the easiest thing to fake. And we know that. I mean, the very, very original 1950s, the guy with the bulldozer, those original tracks,
Right.
those were fake. That's sort of the origin. I mean, people talk about Native American myths and all sorts of stuff, but the real origin began, I forgot the exact year, but like
I think it was
or something
exactly
like that.
I think it was 58, but I think even with the dermal ridges, right? Even with one of these here, right? Yeah. It's not good enough, right?
I mean, you can carve those, you can put them in, you can 3D print them.
Yeah.
You could take an ape foot or a human foot, high resolution 3D scan, modify it, widen it, lengthen it, do whatever you want to it. Hell, you could put a mid-tarsal break in it.
Yeah, and that's
by the way, 10 to 15% of modern humans have.
If you're just joining us, you're late. We have the great Professor Todd Disotell, my friend Todd Disotell, long time running. It's a long time coming here. So you've always been a proponent. We're going to backstep here. A lot of people go, why does the professor go on TV all the fucking time? Right? We can swear here. We're drinking.
Okay.
Everybody, by the way, cheers to everybody out there that drinks with us. Prosit. Here we go. Yeah.
As I said, it's about scientific outreach. I'm a huge proponent of that. I do lots of popular lectures. I've done something like 36 TV shows. I can't even count the number of podcasts I've done. One of my favorite of which was actually Laura Krantz, Grover Krantz's niece.
Yes.
Actually has a podcast called Wild Things. And I just loved doing that with her. That was really cool. And one of my colleagues at NYU, his screensaver is Grover and his dog's skeleton from the Smithsonian.
And they were Russian hound dogs, right? Or Russian?
Yeah, it was something gigantic.
Bullhound, yeah.
Yeah, it had its paws on his shoulders.
I've read and reread his book several times, and I think everybody that needs to understand that Bigfoot Prints by Grover Krantz is one of the most important books you can read, because I think we're going to move into keeping things at distance, right, Todd? A lot of people talk about Bigfoot and get very emotionally attached to it. And that's a fine thing if you've seen it, but a lot of things you have to keep it at distance, right, Todd?
Yeah, I think that's extremely important. And I think there are a lot of people out there, I've met dozens of them, who they saw something, well, hundreds probably, but they saw something. But over time, they kind of internalize it, they reinforce it, and so that shadowy thing you saw when you were 16 now all of a sudden takes on all the characteristics of what everybody's writing about, and you now believe it. You'll pass a lie detector test because you have so internalized it and so reinforced it that you will pass a lie detector test, and you absolutely believe you saw it.
And that's the thing. I mean, you do. I would say maybe half a dozen conferences a year.
Not the last 2.5,
right?
But nobody's done anything.
Right, but you meet a lot of people that think they've seen something, but they're emotionally attached, and that's a thing that big thing that Grover Krantz said is you got to keep it at arm's length. You have to keep it in perspective.
Well, and that's what I talk about with skepticism, alternative hypotheses. Is this a testable hypothesis? How do you disprove that particular hypothesis? You can never prove a hypothesis, but you can disprove one. And, that's the heart of the hypothetical deductive scientific method.
And that's the thing. But but a lot of people now that is once you point, might not be Bigfoot, and we're going to lead into the $10 million Bigfoot bounty, is now you're a fucking hater, right? Now you don't believe in Bigfoot. Now you're just fucking pissing on everybody's parade. And how did that work out for you?
I got some real detractors and, let's say, non-fans.
I never watched the show, so I didn't know.
I have a lot of fans as well. And so this will probably piss off people, but I divide what I call the Bigfoot community into 3/3. There's the absolute hoaxers, and there's too many to mention. There are what I call, and it's not terribly pejorative, the hucksters. The guy, there was a sighting here, I'm going to build a museum, I'm going to open a campground, I'm going to make money off of this belief.
The charlatans, right?
But they're not faking stuff, they're just making money off of it. And then about 1/3 of the community are really serious people trying to do the best possible science and going out there, setting the camera traps, learning anatomy, being able to tell a bear paw from something else. So there are some really dedicated people doing what I think is good work. And I just want to give a shout out to a local Massachusetts guy, my friend Jonathan Wilk. He leads the Massachusetts, BFRO or whatever it's called. But he is really trying. I'm training him in sample collection without contaminating it and things like that. If anybody's going to find it, it's going to be those guys. You don't want these hoaxers or the hucksters. Well,
let's now that we're about 18 minutes into the show, Todd, your thoughts on your obviously an educated individual. You're a professor. Do you think it exists?
I won't say it does not. It
Fair
cannot.
enough.
I will say it's extremely unlikely because, first of all, people have been searching for 75 years. Now, nobody doesn't have a high-resolution camera in their pocket. There are tens of thousands of trail cams out there. I have 10 in my backyard here in Massachusetts and 12 in New York in Sullivan County. I get bears and coyotes and foxes and fishers and turkey and deer. I just haven't had an unknown hominin yet. I've had a potential poacher or trespasser who's an unknown hominin, technically.
That wasn't me, dude. I was just walking by. I had to piss, dude.
But so there's still no direct evidence. But also there's something biologists talk about, minimum population viability analyses. This can't be one or two of them out there to survive for hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands or millions of years if you subscribe to the Gigantopithecus thing. There has to be thousands of individuals to maintain enough genetic continuity and not become so inbred that they go extinct, or one drought or one bad winter or something wipes them all out. And so if there's that many, why do we still have no evidence? And that, I think, is something that really needs to be answered. And if you go into, interdimensional time travel, portals, bullshit, then you're out of science. I just don't even need to talk to you.
I'm going to check it off my box, not go into that. So here's the thing is, talking about that is a lot of people say, if it's flesh, focus. If it's flesh and blood, a lot of people go, we don't want it to be killed. We don't want an alpha sample. We don't want it. Science will require that. Correct? I mean, it has to.
We don't need to kill it. First of all, if it exists, they will die. So we will find body parts, bones, whatever. We'll get into environmental DNA, I think, in a few minutes here.
Exactly. Yep.
So to back up, I was actually recruited for the $10 million Bigfoot bounty, not to be a co-host and on it, but I was actually recruited by what was then Spike Television and Lloyd's of London to come up with the scientific criterion for what would be definitive proof. And, I came up with, you basically have to have clear video or unadulterated photographs and a biological sample.
Right. The gold standard, I think, is
that had to be outside the range of any known primate species. Because, an escaped chimp in the woods, or somebody had, an orangutan that they let loose and it sat somewhere and, oh, look, primate ate DNA. It had to fall outside the known range of any known primate species.
Right.
And you had to have either physical, a bone, piece of flesh, something, or forensically cleared photography or videography. Right.
But I do a little episode, a little vignette on our YouTube channel, which is 3-minute video. And I do my best to dispel suspicious video. And that's easy to do. But we were just talking about something that can't be bullshitted. And that's DNA proof. Right. And you're at the forefront of eDNA at your lab in Amherst. So I would love to hear about that. And I think everybody else we should take a pause and hear about that.
Well, I will be. So because of the pandemic, my lab renovation isn't quite finished yet, even after being there for 2 years, but it should be by the end of May. And supply chain issues have just messed up getting all the equipment and reagents, partly because the stuff I do is the same stuff you use for COVID testing.
Oh,
so you don't want to interfere with COVID testing to do your research, because we've got to get beyond this thing. But eDNA has tremendous promise. So I'm kind of leaving the primate evolution research that I've done for 30 years because we've figured it out. I mean, except for some real small twigs on the primate evolutionary tree, we know who goes where and how much variation they have, how distantly related they are. But when I was doing that kind of research, we didn't have the new, what they call next generation DNA sequencing technology. I prefer to call it second or third because there's always a next.
Right.
So my favorite slide I use, and I have to update it every year in my class, is when they completed the human genome, the first draft of it, version 1.0, they're up to 18.9 or something now. It's like Microsoft Windows. It costs to sequence 1 million bases of DNA. It costs $10,000. Today, to sequence 1 million bases of DNA, it costs 1/10 of a cent. So that beats Moore's law. Computer chips double in capacity every 18 months and half of the price, double the capacity. It wiped out Moore's law with DNA sequencing. And that allows us to be sloppy. So I have here in my house in Mass, about 150 feet away, I have a pond. I can go take a scoop of water out of it or a scoop of dirt out of my 5.5 acres, and I can sequence every fragment of DNA in it for a couple $100. And then using computers, sort out what did I sequence.
Right.
And so every living organism sheds DNA constantly. You spit, you shit, you slough off skin cells, hair cells, you die and decompose, you menstruate, all these different. I once came up with a list of 30 different eights, expectorate, micturate, defecate. But all those things leave DNA. Just the mere act of breathing and talking, as COVID has demonstrated to us, you are shedding microparticles as you breathe and talk. And so there's DNA everywhere. But in the past, it was just too expensive to try to recover it and sequence.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I heard.
We can do enormous things. Recently, just in the last 6 months or so, they've actually demonstrated if you go through like a zoo and have an air filter and just pick up air, you can actually identify the animals present. So that
how expensive would that be? How expensive is that now?
Hundreds to thousands of dollars for a decent study. But
it's an air capture. It's
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I now have things to like dump into lakes where I can set the depth. I drop a weight, it opens up at 25 feet down, grabs the water and closes. Then I bring it up and I can then test what's down at 25 feet versus at 5 feet versus at 100.
Oh, look, this monster.
Yeah, well, my goal is actually my oldest son went to SUNY Plattsburgh on the shores of Lake
Champlain. Yes.
So I want to go for Champ.
Yep.
Yeah. But my secret goal is, now that I own 2 houses in the woods in the middle of nowhere, Massachusetts and New York.
It's not the middle of nowhere, dude. It's right here.
Berryville is the middle of nowhere, as you said. Yeah. Barely thereville. But I want to see, do we got mountain lions here yet? There's 1 million people claiming sightings, bad video, trail cams, etc. We know one like 5 years ago actually made it from Minnesota to Connecticut till it got run over by a Connecticut asshole.
And that's we call New Jersey assholes right here. Sorry, Chuck. But you've seen up here, it's nothing but Jersey plates when you're up here.
Yeah. But it's I think that'd just be cool. But I have personally seen bobcat, fisher cat, fox, coyote. I mean, coyotes actually, I have about 100 yards out my back window, and I wear earplugs at night because the little bastards are yipping all night long.
Yeah.
So I just want to see what's there, but also be able to apply these environmental DNA analyses to these kind of I hate to call them science outreach shows because nobody wants to just do real.
It's a very.
I've proposed with so many producers and other people, like, let's just do some real fucking science and just go do a biodiversity sample of this region. They're like, no cryptids.
Well, I can ask you real quick. Is Mike Merchant is a good friend of mine, and I think he was on $10 million Bigfoot Bounty, and Mike's going to be on the show in a couple weeks. How do you deal with the producers and like, hey, let's keep it fucking real, dude? It's like, no, Todd, we got to keep it's got to be Bigfoot.
It's really hard, and I was extremely excited to be recruited by the $10 million Bigfoot Bounty. So as I said, initially I was just coming up with scientific criteria. Then they said, could you make a portable lab? You know, I'm like, for 120,000, I could.
It's a challenge, right? It's a challenge to you.
And initially, because Breaking Bad was really popular, and I was a huge fan of Breaking Bad, and I was bald and had mustache. You know, I was
Heisenberg. You were Heisenberg, right?
They wanted to do it in an RV, but we ended up just doing it in crates and unpacking it in 2 different locations. And then the TV producers have this insane idea that all scientists want to be on TV. And probably 0.1% do. And they're like, we're going to do 8 episodes and we need a scientific expert for 8 different things, a different person every week to do this. And they like the first 20 they approach it. No fucking way. And so 3 days before we ordered all the lab equipment. We were ready to do it. I was going to be the nerd in the lab.
Yeah, the go-to guy, right? Yeah.
But not a host.
Right.
And 3 days before, they're like, oh, we really need you to be the host. And then I proposed my friend and colleague, a field biologist, Natalia Reagan.
She's wonderful, yes.
Yeah. So that's how we ended up on the show. Initially, it was just, here's the contract. And then it was like, okay, here's your lab and I'll run it. And then all of a sudden, 3 days before I'm getting on the plane, oh, we need you to be the host.
Well, you trimmed your. Hey, we got a question from our friend. I'm sure you know Thomas Steenberg. Big question here. Professor Disotell, can any DNA sample be identified as Sasquatch when there is no Sasquatch to compare it to? Thanks, Tom. We appreciate that.
So that's one of the very first shows I did was for Monster Quest, and Jeff Meldrum was up in Ontario. And my lab, I had a really brilliant research group at NYU. And we would sit around drinking beers or whiskey, coming up with what would Bigfoot be? I mean, just spitballing. Yeah. And the lead theories at that time were it's relic Gigantopithecus. So if it is that, the DNA would fall on the orangutan lineage, but not be an orangutan. And because we can count up the number of mutations and knowing mutation rates and stuff, we can identify how long a sample split from something else. So that was one theory. Lately, people have been trying to say it's a Denisovan or a Neanderthal. But again, we would place an unknown on the evolutionary tree, assuming it's a primate, which nobody ever says it's not. Well, except for the interdimensional time travel beings.
That's the second time you brought that up.
It just bugs the shit out of me.
I know. I can tell.
But we could place it on a new branch of a tree. And if it made any sense, yes. So we don't need to have something to compare it to. We're comparing it to all of life. We're comparing it to the tree of life and placing it on the tree. And that will tell us what it is if you had such a sample that, as I said, fell out the range of any other known species. And presuming it's an ape, that's, a presumption, common one.
That was a big comma there. Big pause.
That, this is an unknown ape. And then people would be really excited.
Well, I mean, Todd, it seems like I've been dealing with it for the last couple of years. I think if you had an opinion, do you think honestly, if the thing hasn't been hit by a truck in the northern Canadian border on the highway, does this thing really exist? And I'm not gonna hold you to this, but I think I'm gonna hold you to this.
Well, I've said many a time, I can't say it does not exist, but I will say, and I've said this on other shows, the probability is not 0, but it's adjacent to zero.
Just south of zero.
Yeah, just for all the reasons, again, the minimum population viability analyses, the lack of data, et cetera, et cetera. And their primates went extinct in North America 35 million years ago until, the Native Americans crossed the Bering Strait 15 to 20,000 years ago. Most primates are pretty damn tropically or temperate, adapted.
Right.
having and then just the size thing alone is kind of strange and weird. So people talk about Gigantopithecus being a giant. No, it had really big jaws and teeth because it ate really shitty food.
Right.
It probably was gorilla sized, 300-400 pounds, not 8 feet tall and 800 pounds.
And I think Grover, and I continue to quote the good Dr. Krantz, but he said, we go through birth, gestation, birth, getting older and growing older and dying. We are delayed for that because we have to eat more food to feed our brain or something like that. I might be losing it somewhere in the translation. He thinks he theorized that maybe Bigfoot lasted maybe if it lives in the North America, it lives maybe 46 years at the most because the kids don't have to learn as we learn. Yeah. Does that make sense? I'm sure I slaughtered that, but
we look at human evolution, until the last tens of thousands of years, we didn't break 40 in general.
Right.
But to have something that large to support a brain, even if it was just a gorilla-sized brain in something twice as big as a gorilla, it would be eating all day long.
It would have to, right?
Yeah, it just to support that brain and the body in general, et cetera. Where that would require, like modern humans, to live longer and to survive, we need tools. Where are their tools?
We got another question from our good buddy Pat at Squatch Talk. Let's see if I can show this one. Todd, what are your opinions of the results of those the Olympic Peninsula Olympic project nests?
Well, excuse me, I'm gonna. My allergies are really killing me. I
thought that was your opinion.
I actually did. I did the environmental DNA on that, and deer and elk and bear and coyote and stuff, but no primate. Well, human, but no primate.
And is it possible? Would it be possible for a large primate to live in that nest and not leave DNA?
I don't think so. I mean, half of my research has been from gorilla nests and chimp nests and stuff like that. I mean, the Olympic guys, they're pretty good, but you don't lay in the nest and take a picture to show the size of it without human DNA behind. Sorry, just saying.
Oops.
We need an unmolested nest sample, or else you've screwed the pooch on that.
So what's going to take you, Professor Disotell, to this? It's going to take an ape on your fucking table? A dead Sasquatch?
No, you could give me a finger, a couple bones, scat that's not bear. I have looked at so much bear shit in my life. They should all the time, all day long.
And you feel, that's back in your NYU days, right?
Yeah, but now with environmental DNA, we don't even need an actual scat sample or a hair sample or anything like that. We need a DNA signature that's unknown. And if it's there, this stuff will find it.
And that's the thing, not to cut you off, Todd, but that's the thing I think you've always been a proponent of. Show me the fucking shit, and if it's there, I'll tell you when it's real.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can, as I was telling you about the air, I mean, we can send drones out to sample hundreds of miles. We can send drones out to land and get a water sample from a tiny pond or a stream or dirt from somewhere. I mean, we could, in theory, sample really, really well. The cool thing about that is we'll discover other things we didn't know. What other species are living here that we didn't think they ranged this far, but oh, look, they're actually here. So that actually happened with a show I did for, I can't remember which network. They gave me purported Yeti scalp from a monastery. And it turned out the hair was from a Himalayan goral, a mountain goat.
Okay.
Imagine mountain goats high up in the mountains. Except the known range, this was outside the known range of it. So, there was a tiny little scientific discovery made in the search for Yeti. And I think the same thing could be done for the search for Bigfoot. You would find species you did not know were there. But this also gets to disease stuff. You could find out, are these viruses, are these bacteria, are these fungi in this region where we didn't know?
And I think that's a more important philosophy about this is, yes, everybody's looking for Bigfoot, but let's look at other really true to life species that could be there and could be saved. Everybody wants to, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, everybody loves Bigfoot. But yes, there's a lot of shit going on, right, Todd?
And I've proposed that to so many different producers and stuff, and they're like, no, nobody will watch that. If you accidentally discover it while looking for Bigfoot or chupacabra or champ or something, then it'll work.
We might put it in.
Yeah, they're not going to say like, what's in northern Maine or what's in northern Washington State. Nobody cares, or will watch it at least.
Yeah. So what do you say? We're gonna start winding down here, but what do you say to the visual representations, the visual sightings of Bigfoot and or any cryptid? Let's not just pigeonhole you with Bigfoot.
Yeah.
But what do you say to the thousands of sightings? What's your opinion?
I think it's a lot. So there's been a couple really good things written about like the Loch Ness Monster and how basically it didn't become popular until after King Kong in 1933 or whatever, when they had a plesiosaur in King Kong, and then all of a sudden everybody's seeing Loch Ness. Chupacabra, there's no reference before 1968 or something like that. Aliens, they all look like E.T., right?
Some strange reason.
They're all iPads with big brains and googly eyes and long necks. That's now what aliens are.
Yeah.
I think once you get it into the popular whatever,
pop culture or social media,
that's what everybody's going to see. Like, is what I want to know, and I haven't delved into this enough. When did Bigfoot get glowing red eyes? I mean, no other animal has that.
Let's go to the chat. Nobody's got it.
Yeah.
That's the thing is I'm a optimistic believer. I'm not a believer. I'm not a knower. I'm an optimistic. I have no sightings. I think I got it into my head when I was injured. I had spinal surgery. I sat in bed reading a bunch of books, and I was like, oh, this thing might exist.
Yeah.
You know, so but a lot of people can be wrong, right? A lot of people can be wrong.
Oh, I mean, how many women were hung at the Salem or burnt at the stake at the Salem witch trials?
Right.
And hundreds of other examples of that throughout human history. You know, mass hysteria, blah, blah, blah. But I think, you know, these consistencies, they're not accidental. And it's not because everybody's seen it. It's this is what they think they saw. And now they, you know, I got everything Jeff Meldrum has ever written. I got all the brochures. I got all of the lunch pails. I got everything, everything imaginable Bigfoot down to, you know, I literally have probably 30 Bigfoot t-shirts and sweatshirts.
You got an eye patch. So what's going on at Amherst in the future? What do you got planned? What's the futures of your lab? Let's talk about that.
Do this biodiversity sampling.
Right. Yes.
For regular animals, but also for disease. So we now have a bunch of hideous tick-borne diseases up here. We got mosquito-borne diseases up here. You know, we got all sorts of things. You set a mosquito trap, you get 1,000 mosquitoes, you grind them in a blender, you sequence all the viral DNA in them. We'll know what's floating around out in my backyard or anybody's backyard. Same thing with ticks and stuff like that. You know, are there, you know, what's taking out the bats? You know, what fungi and other things do we have growing in this area? What do we need to be careful of? So there's just, but it's the same thing. Those same studies will find Bigfoot if it's out there.
Pause. Caution pause. Yes, I think that's an important thing to say is, you know, life goes on with or without Bigfoot, and mostly without. But Todd, I'd like to thank you for coming on tonight, man. It's been a pleasure. We've covered a lot of ground in 46 minutes and 56 seconds. So, you know, I'm going to see you this fall. We're going to shoot some deer and hang out.
October, November, December, there's some deer going down.
Yes. Do you anything you want to talk about you got coming up?
Everything's been on hold for quite a while till I see how things go here. But I do have a new crossbow, a couple new guns. I want to sight in, but I haven't been able to use any of them since October. So, but you know, I'm not going to shoot Bigfoot. Hopefully I'll catch them on my trail cam or on,
I will.
Yeah. Okay. Just put a finger on it. That's all you need to do.
So the last thing before we go is I would like you to tell the people that are online with us how to keep it in perspective and how to be optimistic but not get it over, you know what I'm saying?
It's just try to be a scientist in the sense of what's an alternate explanation. You know, so it's not my quote, but I use it a lot. You know, if I'm running in Brimfield down Route 20 here and I hear hoofbeats, I'm not going to turn around to look for a zebra. You know, so what's an alternative explanation for what you saw? Bears stand up. You know, shadows are murky. Sounds could be anything, including hoaxers. You know,
most likely hoaxers.
Yeah, I mean, when rocks fall down on your roof when you're on a Bigfoot expedition out in a cabin in the woods, I guarantee you it's teenagers. Well, I can't guarantee, but I would have done that as a teenager.
Todd, to be honest, I was at home when you were there. So
yeah, but you know, so what's a more plausible explanation? And you know, and there's dozens of them for sounds, for sightings, for poop, whatever. There's dozens of alternative explanations, and that's what scientists are looking for. Is once we can rule out all the alternatives we can think of, something's a bit more plausible. But until we rule out as many alternative explanations as possible, it's not proven. And it's never proven. It can always be disproven.
That's an excellent note to end on. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. We had a big turnout. Professor Todd Disotell. Todd, thank you so much for showing up and addressing the issues and being the fucking kick-ass guy that you always are. For more information, like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll be right back. Or we're not going to be back, but we'll say goodnight. So, bye. Say goodbye, Todd.
Take care.
You've been watching From Behind Tall Trees, a Catskill Appalachian Research Collective production. For more information on this program and others like it, remember to like, share, and subscribe to CARCUniversal today. To join the conversation on our Facebook group, become a member of the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective Facebook group. CARC. Relentless.